Well, good afternoon and welcome to yet again another podcast today here at The Way Forward. We're absolutely excited and privileged to have Mr. Matt Herrman here. Matt Herrman is an employee. He's a lobbyist, a paid professional lobbyist at the Roosevelt Group in Washington, D.C. Matt and I know each other personally. We met many years ago when I was the Army liaison to the U.S. House of Representatives, and he was the chief of staff for Delegate Bardalo from the great island state of Guam. And we had lots of contact, lots of trips together, doing congressional delegations. And Matt was one of those kinds of individuals who's just wonderful to bump into an environment where you know nothing. He takes you under his wing, and he helped me to make sure I understood what I needed to do as an Army liaison, as well as really taught me the inner workings of Congress, and it was most helpful. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's good to be on here.
Well, Matt, there's so much we can talk about.
Yes, there is.
And I think it's interesting because there's such a stigma that's associated with the word lobbyist, and there's probably some good reasons for that, but really in the greater scheme of things, trying to connect the federal government together to help understand what requirements are, what's the true needs are, and to cut through all the systems. Lobbyists play a key role in that, of connecting the right people together, helping them get the right kind of advice that they need. And in my experience, helping to get language written that ensures something has, less of a just an annual kind of budgeting process, but more long-term budgeting that helps someone like me as a soldier to have the resources I need to do our job. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown of how all that works?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of harken back. I went to American University, and at American University, they have an institute on lobbying, dedicated to understanding it, studying it, and really, quite frankly, kind of improving the industry, if you will. And you're right, there is oftentimes a stigma associated with it, but the reality is, if you want to look at two buckets, there's kind of one bucket of lobbyists or people that know folks. They go to fundraisers, they can open doors, but that's what they do. They open doors. They're kind of influencers of sorts. Then there's the other type of lobbyists that, sure, you do that stuff, right? You got to know people. You can't not know people. But more so, you're brought on because you understand the process. You understand the policy. You understand all the things that go behind it. Not, businesses, individuals. If you're not in Washington, if you've not been a part of the process, it can seem pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of intricacy behind it, the way there is in any industry, right? And so good lobbyists, I think, really sit down with clients, understand where they're at, where they want to go, and how they are able to build a political brand, be known by their delegations on the Hill, whoever that might be, as well as their customer. And in this case, the federal government customer. Is it DOD? Is it Department of Transportation? What have you, right? And so you build out that platform, and part of it is, yes, getting to know folks, getting to understand who you are and what you do, but also understanding the challenges. Where are the hiccups? Are your hiccups legal hiccups, in which case we need to go change policy? Or are your hiccups that there isn't money there and we need to maybe direct money your way? And what is that going to take and what's going to happen? And so, the lobbying has gotten a bad reputation because there are people out there like Jack Abramoff that abuse the system. The system does rely on as a lot of processes in government in general, rely on the goodwill and the good actions of individuals. And when they don't act according to that kind of moray or standard, that's when things go south. And there have been plenty of examples of that. But at the end of the day, having a lobbyist is really basically, think of it as having a Sherpa helping you with the federal government. And the same thing is there are local and state level examples of it. Every state's different, but certainly in the federal government, you want someone telling you, okay, here's where we need to go. Here's the people we need to talk to, but here's how you talk to them. And here are the right things to do. Because as a staffer on the Hill, those offices, Chris, you knew that when dealing with a lot of those offices, they're not big. They may seem big by comparison to other places, but they're relatively small. And especially on the House side, you may be dealing with 30 or 40 different things in a given day. So the extent that a company or an individual from that district comes with a request that is vetted, that's kind of baked and thought through, it makes it a lot easier for that staffer to get that boss to go do and take that action, and it can make a world of difference.
It's funny you use the term Sherpa because that's exactly what I envision. When we're working with startups or we're working with even mid-sized companies who don't quite understand how to do business with the federal government, it's like, having somebody who knows the trail that gets you to base camp, that gets you
Yep.
all the way up to the top of Mount Everest. Without the Sherpa, you're surely going to die on the journey. So that's a great comparison. So, so for those companies that we do have out here at the Way Forward, we have the full spectrum from the bigs to the littles, but it's not just, how do you open doors and how do you do things? It's the federal regulations that you don't
Yes.
have any clue. A lot of businesses will start in the civilian sector or the private sector. And so they say, well, I'd really like to get working with the government too, because, there's duality of effect and there's capabilities there. But all of a sudden you run into all of these bureaucratic things that you have no clue. In the private sector, some CEO says, yeah, I want that, I'll buy 7, and they write you a check.
Yep.
That's not how it works in the federal government. What kind of examples can you give us?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a book on that called Rulemaking. It's very dense, and I don't, unless you want to geek out, I don't argue that you should read it. But it does. It talks about the, passing a bill or passing a provision in a bill is like the first of multiple steps. You then have to watch, what is the federal government now going to do in terms of regulation? How specific are they going to be? And you need to influence it. And there's ways to do that, right? The people that are writing the regulation, you need to, in many cases, just educate them about, hey, what is the commercial sector doing? Because they care about that. They don't want to recreate something. They want to create something new, I should say. They would rather steal an idea that maybe is working in the private sector and adapt that for whatever the government's needs are. But you got to map out the people to influence. You've got to map out how you want the regulation to look like. So that comes with drafts. Oftentimes, vetted depending on the severity of it, legally by lawyers and so forth. So it can be a process. And you're right. I think sometimes people think, hey, I know someone, they're going to do it. And it doesn't really work that way. You have to justify it in their terms. Why is this good? They know why it's good for you. Why is it good for them? Why is it going to help them? Are they going to save money? Are they going to cut down on inefficiencies? Are they going to achieve a broader goal that they might have, especially with this administration, right? Is there a green component to it? Is there an energy savings thing? So you want to tailor that message to the audience that you have. And that audience, although they may be government service employees and insulated to some extent from the politics, they care about the politics. They're aware of it. They know what their bosses, who are political officials, want. And so they're deferential to that to some extent, right? So you got to balance the practical with the politics, and that can be not always a challenge, but it can take some time to find that right balance for folks.
Yeah, I mean, most of our companies will know how hard it is to write a grant, and if you don't hire a professional grant writer, you'll
Right.
spend an awful lot of time learning how not to write a grant because
Yes.
they'll just keep getting disapproved. But yeah, so the language then. So I think what most startups and 8As and others don't understand is that if you're going to get into this game, you've got to have people who know how to play this game. I mean, if you've been selling the civilian sector, you've been playing,
Yep.
you've been playing soccer, and all of a sudden you're over here and you're playing lacrosse. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, and I think especially for newer companies, right? The window of opportunity is right away. You want to build your political brand right off the bat. You want to go in, ideally, when you don't have an ask. Here's who we are. Here's how many employees we have. Here's how many are in your district or in your state. Here's what we're trying to achieve and what we ultimately want to do. Use us as a resource, and we'll certainly stay in touch with you to the extent that you can build a relationship. Because as a staffer, I used to, my sister-in-law criticized me one time. She's like, why are you so judgmental about people? And I said, as a staffer, I've got about 30 seconds to size someone up as they're making an ask. And so things that I'm looking for is, do I know this person? Do I have a relationship? Have we done something together before that gives me reason to have high trust in faith in the person, or the opposite? And you don't want the opposite. Or do they have a firm? Do they have someone from a firm that I know that has been a partner with us, that works with us, and is providing us good information? Because at the end of the day, you don't want bad information. That is the worst outcome of all. And so building those relationships early, and a lot of it is just personality based. So you're not always going to be best friends with every staffer, but getting to know, be present and add value. That's what's going to help you in the long term, because you inevitably will have challenges, right? And then it's a hell of a lot easier to go back in to try to address those challenges, whatever that might be.
I think, one of the things you taught me is that I think businesses, they think of Congress, they think of them as a representative of them as a citizen, as opposed to them as a representative to as a company that's in their district. And that it's not just about favoritism, it's about helping understanding what a company in their district does, understanding the value it has, and not just for their own understanding of things when they're in DC and they see where it might fit to help the citizens within their state, but it's also for that business to get out of the vacuum they're in and talk to the member of Congress and say, here's what we do, here's the value we provide, here's the impact, and not just in our state, but also potentially if it's the federal government writ large. And I think a lot of people fail to understand the value of reaching out to a lobbyist to help them with that.
No, I think you're spot on about that. And steal a phrase from Mitt Romney, businesses are people too.
Yes.
That they do. I mean, I think there's sometimes an assumption that when a new company starts up and say they get some local press or statewide press, that the member knows they're there. Don't ever make that assumption whatsoever. I mean, again, for as much as the staff is dealing with, members are dealing with even more. Now, that's not to say the member isn't aware, but sometimes, to your point, right, maybe you're in this space that's actually solving a problem that they're interested in, or a space that they think that district should grow more. You're doing cyber work, or maybe you're doing HR, where HR and AI kind of combine together, and they want to do more of that. You might spark an interest in them that you didn't know existed, right? But that again is where a firm, if they're doing their homework, can help you say, this is a person that might be really interested in you because they have talked a lot about this and they're going to really, I think, be interested in wanting to help you. Or, this person really, what you're doing does not jive with where they're at. So you're right about that. There are a lot of assumptions made about members and what they know and don't know, and their staff as well. And the other thing too, you kind of hinted at this a little bit. Yes, getting in to see the member is great. And if you are a constituent company, they're generally at some point going to take a meeting with you. And if they're really interested, they're going to want to come and see your office, see what you're doing, meet with the workers. But the staff is arguably more important, because the staff is who's doing all the work. They're feeding things to the member, and good members are asking good questions and pushing back and wanting to learn more. But we're not, the Congress is full of a wide range of folks, and oftentimes they'll just take what the staff gives them and run with it. So having relationships on both sides is very important. And on top of that, depending on what you are doing, the committee staffs are also very important, right? Because they are the policy experts, or at least are supposed to be. And again, don't make the assumption they know that your new technology or your new capability exists. Sometimes educating them about that, just so they're aware of it, because they're the ones that are going to meet with the departments and ask, hey, why aren't you budgeting for this stuff? Are you aware of this capability? Why aren't you doing anything with it? So there's a range of stakeholders that you want to meet with, and oftentimes those committee staffs get overlooked. You got to have both. To your point, it's engagement at the department, and if you're talking DoD, it could be multiple places. It's engagement with your personal offices and your senators from your states. It's also engagement with the right committee staff, whoever that might be. It's a web of connections that you have to start weaving.
Yeah, I mean, I've told a CEO recently, I said, if staffers on the Hill know what you're doing, even if they're not in your district office, even if they're not in a personal staff and they're a professional staff, if they at least know there's somebody out there doing this, it's almost a part of business development, because that person is their focus is doing the right thing for the federal government. They're all about connecting people and things together. And so when they see, some big is sitting there just gobbling up all of the resources, but they're not producing, there's always the, hey, what about, I got briefed by this company that does this. Go
I got an example for you. That's a great point. We had a company that went up to brief some committee staffers, and they have a 3D printing capability. And we went up to talk about their capability. And to your point, we were raising some concerns with the replicator program, and it dawned on the staff, oh yeah, we're not dealing with this part. You're providing a potential, I guess, service, although I'm not sure service is the right word, and we're not focused on that. Thank you for bringing this up. We need to be talking to so and so and kind of talking about it. And also business development. They brought up, or are you talking to these people because they're doing this? So you're absolutely right. Sometimes these meetings, you come in with an agenda, you want an outcome, even if it's just a 101 of who you are. Oftentimes you leave with extra stuff that is more BD focused, which is, I think, all goodness. And you're right. You can't assume anything, particularly in Washington. You gotta footstep.
It's like with us, we let you know what kind of clients we have, what kinds of things they're capable of doing. And then when you're in all of these meetings in DC and you're up there, you're interacting with members and staffers, and you're out there. I mean, you're like a scout. You're out there doing a reconnaissance, and but you know what capabilities we have in our back pocket. And so you can go, wow, okay, I hadn't thought about that. You see the two connections, you drop a card, and now, and again, it's part of business development. So what we try to bring is an extension of what a company doesn't have organically, especially startups. Startups are wonderful. They've got some really inspiring CEO that sees and has a vision, and usually has some sort of technical team that is building it and creating it and understands that there's probably they can feel and they can read and know that there's some sort of requirement out there. But it's like, now once you get it to the point where it can plug in and actually make a difference, where is that? Where is that requirement? And then how do you pursue that requirement? And that's where we try to come in, because they don't have that operational arm of their company to do that. We fill that gap for them in a degree.
Exactly. And I think, especially if you're new, a startup company, it'd be great if you can hire a government relations person off the bat, especially if you think you're going to do a lot of government work. But oftentimes, and I know this sounds a little self-serving, but getting a multi-client firm, you have forced multiplication, because you're not having one person necessarily. You're getting multiple people. And certainly with Roosevelt, you're getting a core staff, but then you're getting these consultants that might be specific to a service, specific to an issue set. So I'm not saying it's cheap. It is an investment, but you're getting a tremendous capability, especially when you start up and you're not maybe quite sure where you're going to end up. It just gives you that flexibility and adaptability to, play with a lot of capability.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting when you put it in that perspective, you go, okay, you can either hire 9 people to do this with this many FTEs and the amount of money it would cost, or you can do a small retainer, have access,
Yes,
plug and play a number of different ways to go about this, and have a really deep bench of a dozen plus
yep,
that can come up with different ways to do it. I think the term branches and sequels, that's a military term, but it's like, for every single thing you thought you were going to do, there's at least 4 other things you could do that may be better than your original intention. And so having people who understand how to maneuver that terrain, and have that, as you said, multiplicity of effect, if you would, I think, in the end, what you do is more valuable than most people absolutely understand. And let me give you an example, so you can jump on this one. So you've got a great company, they've got some sort of a tool, and an organization within the Department of Defense says, yeah, I would like to take my end of year dollars. I have enough dollars left over this fiscal year. I want to buy one of those because they've got an ATO or they've got some sort of funding mechanism, and they go, I'm going to buy that, or it's an 8A, or it's a veteran-owned company, and they don't have to go through all the hoops, and they go, we want to buy that. Well, that money is spent, and there's no money in the budget that begins at the beginning of the fiscal year.
that's
and
right.
you have to go through the whole thing again, and hopes that there might be some money left over to do it again. And that's no way to do business. Why is that, Matt? And how do you solve that?
Well, I mean, there's multiple. You're right. There is no way to solve business, but I think the way that you do it, right? If you get some seed money, you got a couple of paths, right? You can certainly go the congressional route. But again, I caution companies on this because the same thing, if we're going for money this year, so this we're working on FY25 bills in theory, not in theory, FY25 starts October 1 a year for the federal government, but people aren't going to see a final budget bill, appropriations bill until, if we're lucky, January 1 or around then. We'll see how these elections pan out. It could be many months into next year. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say you get that money January 1. That money doesn't flow to that office until the spring at the earliest. And then getting it on contract, and you're lucky if you're an 8A or someone with special designation, you may be able to get that money, but you're still looking at roughly a year from now, right? So that is an option. And generally that is funding that needs, maybe you're refining something, you're trying to perfect a technology, but really what you ought to be doing with those offices is sitting down with them to try to build into their future year budgets, right? Because they're in some part of the process. Hey, build some money in. We work this with a client with the National Guard, which is a unique beast unto itself. And of that, the Joint Staff at the Guard Bureau, which doesn't really have a dedicated budget. They get their money from the Air and Army. We saw the potential for this technology to improve training aspects of the state partnership program. And so for 2 years, we got congressional ad money. And this was when the cycle was slightly better, but it still took, and it was O&M money, so it had to get on contract faster, but it took a full year. I mean, it took that whole time to get it. It got on contract right before the money expired, and they were using it. But in those 2 years that we committed to get the marks from the Hill, we also worked with the Guard tangentially, so dual paths here, to build into the budget money for this program so that on the third year, there was budget money. We weren't going to the Hill asking for more money. We were simply saying, don't do anything to cut the budget. Please, 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 by God, just leave it alone. Maybe you foot stomp it, but just, we built that in. And ever since then, that money has slowly grown and the interest has grown in the program. That is a perfect scenario. It does not always happen that easily that time, but that is sort of the battle rhythm you want to get into. You got to do both, because just relying on marks, to your point, bad business model. It's hard to plan. It's very difficult to plan. But if you can deal with a little uncertainty for a year or two, by year 3, your goal is that whoever's using that technology or capability sees the value in it, is building it in the budget, and then what you're doing is really just supporting what they have in their budget.
So I can see every startup out here watching this, their eyes just glassed over when you said 3 years. And what I try to tell them is that if you're going to make this leap, if you're going to go from private sector to the federal space, it's going to take you some time. You're going to have to get the right kinds of people in your organization who can help you. You got to build the contacts, and then you got to understand the tremendous amount of bureaucracy that's associated with this process. Although, the carrot at the end of the stick is very lucrative if you can get there. But it's how you get there, and it's the ability to sustain that approach over time. Because I've heard industry standards between 4 and 5 years to land your first contract. Is that similar to your experience?
I'd say 3 to 5. I mean, we get some clients sometimes that are an extremist, and we can help. But the caution is, this is not a good business model. You're going to get frustrated, and unfortunately, you may get frustrated at us, even though we're not the problem. But yeah, I mean, you do have to think long-term when you're playing with the federal government. It's not a quick fix. It's never a quick fix. It is a long play to get to a good outcome. Now, that's not to say that there are probably plenty of examples that are a fraction of the time frame that we're talking about. But those are few and far between. Those are you're like at a carnival and you hit the 10,000 thing on skee ball. It's the 1 in 100 that you get. It's not like you're going to hit that all the time. And so you do have to take a long view. And I think any business that it does want to get into the federal space needs to think long and hard about that. It's, if you have the time, if you have the ability, because it takes money, right? If you can do that, great. But come in with that expectation. The expectations of a quick turnaround are not realistic. And I think, be candid. When we talk about bad actors, There are firms out there that'll say, oh, don't worry, we'll help you out. It'll be quick. Maybe, but that's not realistic. We're going to tell you it's long-term. And are you in it for the long-term? Because we are. And if you've got the right thing, let's go fight this battle, because it's one, I find it fun, but two, it's doing the right thing. And there aren't, I mean, it's a lot of it's just educating people. And once people get educated about what's out there, smart people will go, got it. We know we need to do something about that.
I agree. Well, just for fun, because I want to see what you say, because I sit in a different chair than you do, and you're in the middle of the action all the day long, and I get to just watch I get to see where all the cockroaches crash in the races, and mash. So, but there are certain things you brought up. You talked about there are bad actors, and so there's subtle ways within the community, if you've been there, where you'll go, oh, that's a bad actor. And one of them for me, is what you just said, which was, if somebody says that they can help you work with the government and they can knock it out like that, I would just say thanks and hang up. The other one that gets me is it's kind of and this may or may not be true, but it's my perspective on the outside, is if somebody's gonna say, okay, contract with me by the hour, that's kind of an indication versus somebody who wants to do a retainer. A retainer to me means you're going to bring on a firm that's going to be thinking about you all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. They're going to be proactive. They're going to be moving. They're going to be asking you questions. They're going to be checking in with you. They're going to be sending you reports, because you're on retainer. To me, that's a very different animal. A lot of companies will go, well, we'll lower our rate. We'll do hourly. But what that means to them is they're just going to sit on their hands until you call them and ask them something.
Well, yeah, I look at it a little bit differently. We are a monthly retainer, and I look at the monthly retainers. I'm going to throw as much as I can in a month to solve problems. And we sometimes we never want to lose money, but if we're going to solve a problem and we got to throw more resources at it for a couple of months, and then we can make it up on the back end, great, we're willing to do that. But you're right, we are always there. We're always on call. We're there to help out, right? We're not limited, and you got a nickel and dime you here and there. Whereas if you do the hourly thing, you may think you're saving money, but in the end, the incentive for the hourly, like a law firm, is bill, baby. I mean, I've been on with clients where we have multiple stakeholders, and some of those stakeholders are hourly and they want to have meetings. And I'm sitting there going, I don't want a meeting. You're wasting my time. I've done what I need to do for the client. That's a good month for me. I'm not just sitting there for 30 minutes so you can send in your bill to say you did something and that something was talking to me. No, so you do have to be, look, but different places have different models for different reasons. Law firms, I've never seen a law firm really provide a retainer option. So you do have the hourly, but you're right. There's pros and cons to it. And I do think the retainer model, though, gives you better value, because you're going to throw more at the problem. Whereas in the hourly, if you're giving them a budget range, they're going to go low end on that type of stuff, right?
Well, yeah, and I don't know if a law office is a good comparison, because they're just there to protect your interests. We are, we're out trying to help you with business. We're trying to
right.
Look at what you have, where it can go, who might need it, what language may need to be written. So we're trying to do biz dev for you. And to some degree, depending upon how much of a startup you are, we're kind of filling in the operations thing for you. Because, I don't know how many times you and I have had a conversation where you're looking at the CEO going, look, here's the strategy, because you don't have one. You just want to sell this to the government, and you read something that says that would be a good thing. So, okay, so who are we going to approach? What's the first month? What's the second month? What's the third month? Here are the goals. Here's the objectives. Here's the goals. Here's the timeline. And here's the absolute deliverables that we're going to provide at the end. And I think that's what most companies will just say, yeah, we'll go do all this stuff, but we'll show them a strategy to get there, a roadmap.
Yeah, because you're right. There are some that just do activity for activity's sake. I'm going to take you here. I'm going to take you there. Look, as a Hill staffer, my time was limited. I'll happily, if you want, we'll parade you around, but that's not an effective use of your time. It's not an effective use of the Hills time. So let's target the people you really need to target, and let's spend quality time. It's quality over quantity. And that's what I'm incentivized to do. And,
Yeah.
it takes some time to educate folks about why that's a better strategy than just meeting more people. But, we'll do what we need to do. But you're hitting on a key thing: quality over quantity. That is important.
Oh yeah, and especially as the consultant side of this equation, somebody comes and says, I want to talk to this command, or I want to talk to that office, wherever they got their information from. I'm like, well, okay,
Let's take a step back. What is it that we want to do, right? Yeah.
that office is the absolute wrong place to go to, and show me what it is you think you're going to tell them. That's absolutely the wrong way to show them what you're trying to do. Go ahead.
We're dealing with this issue not with a client, but a client is serving a community.
Yeah.
And there were some visits recently by some folks in the Department of Defense who were saying, oh, trust us, we'll get you money and blah, blah, blah. And on paper, that office seems like a good fit. It makes sense. In reality, that office has no real money. And it makes no sense because practically speaking, they have challenges, a lot of challenges. And that's the difference between reading something on a piece of paper on an org chart somewhere and thinking you understand it versus really knowing the actors, knowing the players, and what's worth going after, right? And that takes a little bit of a leap of faith on the client to understand that I've hired people that know what they're talking about. And they're trying to direct me in the right way to maximize my time and value.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing for people who are watching this is there's a confluence of things that are necessary. And I always want to say the three-legged stool. You've got to have the person who understands the entity that is best suited for you to align with your business, whatever that might be. And then within that community, do you have those relationships? And in business, relationships are important, but in government, they're huge,
Yeah.
especially on the Hill. It's all about relationships.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I was growing up, I used to always hear, well, he got that job not because of what he knows, but it's who he knows. And I used to think that was an insult. And I went to Capitol Hill and I went, no, that's how you do business. If you don't know somebody, you don't get access. If you don't get access, you don't have that 30 minutes that you just talked about. And if we don't have some sort of a relationship, you don't know whether to trust me in that 30 minutes.
Right.
And I can go to the X file, or I can go to the, or file 15, whatever that is, or I can go right to the top of the heap. So you've got to have that piece. So you got to know where to go. You got to have somebody who knows how to go. And then the third is always the lobbyist side of this in terms of if the government's going to do it, you want to institutionalize it in the budget so it's consistent funding over time. So it may take you 3 to 5 to get there, but then you lock it in for 5. If you don't do that, you're wasting your time.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's end with some Matt-isms. Matt-isms. Okay. I know there's got to be some out there for not just the business sector, but for our military friends across the river from you, our congressional friends. What are some of those incredible insights that you can provide that would cause people to want to watch this video and see it? Did Matt really say that? You got any of those things? You got your list of 10? Don'ts?
Do's and don'ts. Well, a couple. Yeah. If we do do's and don'ts, couple of don'ts. When you're talking, and this is true for Hill staff and I think Department of Defense, humility. Don't be too aggressive, right? Come in with and do be a little bit. Come in with some humility, and try to create an environment where there's a dialogue, right? Not a one-way lecture session. Oftentimes, we surround ourselves with very smart people with a very smart technology or solution, and they are proud of it, and they should be. But, be mindful that, Hill staff and the department folks don't like to feel like they're being talked down to. So you want to, again, kind of facilitate that open dialogue. Do joke around, keep the jokes relatively PC, but you want to, to the extent that you can kind of make things conversational and decrease I used to not joke with my staff, be serious. I said, look, our jobs are serious enough. When I was chief of staff, our jobs are serious enough. I do not need things to be more serious. I need you guys to relax. We're going to have a good time. We're going to take things seriously. To the extent that you can bring that level and tension down, because there's always a tension. There's always going to be a little bit of a tension. To the extent that you can bring that down, I think that's always helpful. And I guess you are not the smartest person in the room when you go to the Hill or to the Pentagon. Let everyone else be smarter than you. It's okay. I'm married, so I am used to being not the smartest guy ever in the room. So I have used marriage as a way to help me cope with the fact that when I go over to the Hill and to the Pentagon, I am not the smartest person. And I've already got that mentality set up for me going forward. I think too, always have definitely do have accurate information. If you're guessing, tell them you're guessing. I think this. Don't claim something that's not fact. That is the number one way to destroy your reputation. And, Chris, we kind of danced around this. I don't think I said it this clearly. My reputation is the most valuable thing that I have. And it's the most valuable thing that I offer my clients. And I guard that and protect it seriously. And, we have unfortunately had to get rid of clients who have not been honest with us and put our reputations at risk, because if I can't be trusted, then I am not of value. And so we're very mindful of that. And I think most good lobbyists, consultants, government relations folks are, that is what is most important. When I pick up the phone and call a staffer that knows me, they're doing that because they trust me that I'm going to give them good information. Yeah. Another thing is having a regular dialogue with updates is always a good thing, but you don't want to be too needy, right? Because then you go into that pile of needy, when someone creates a special inbox for you, then you're in a hurry. That's not a good outcome when someone says that or jokes that they've done something like that. So I think those are all important things that, there's many, many more, but then there's always the other thing to do. And this is where we come in, right? Make sure you have a clear ask. And if you don't have an ask, be clear. I don't have an ask. I just want you to be knowledgeable and understanding of what I'm doing. That's really important because, again, it allows them in their heads to prioritize. Okay, no ask. Got it. I can cool down here. I can just listen and absorb. Ask. Okay, now elevating it. Really important, urgent ask. Okay, now I'm really all ears, right? And I think the other thing too, allow there to be a range of options. If I can, I like giving the staff options. We can do a letter, we can do an email from you, or we can beat the department over the head with a provision, right? Giving people options is good because it allows them to calibrate the politics. And that's the other thing, and that's what we're paid for, is when I'm coming up with solutions, I'm also factoring in the politics. Yep. What does that member care about, and what is going on in their district that might, even though they might agree with what you want to do, is going to make it really hard for them to do what you want them to do. So where is there some middle ground where they can do something but not get in trouble for doing what you ultimately need? So there's a whole lot of factors that go on, and it's sometimes hard to explain, but those are the kind of multi-layered things that are going through my head as we're trying to figure out what to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, that last one is critical because I think it's not just your inside understanding what that district and that congressperson's doing, but it's the other 334 that and oh, by the way, if you do this, you're going to upset this one, you're going to make this one happy, and you might want to talk to this one and team up. So there's, again, that multiplicity effect you're talking about. The other one is the ask. For my military friends out there, what he's talking about is this an information briefing or a decision briefing? Okay, so when you walk in, you let them know so they know how to take the information. Yep. And you're right. If you walk in there, you don't say what kind of briefing this is, they are going to assume you're wanting a decision at the end of this thing. And that's the ask. I want to ask you to do this, or I want you to ask you to do that. And so that's critical. Well, I appreciate it. That's all good gouge. Again, I wouldn't climb Mount Everest without a Sherpa. I definitely would not cross the river into DC without you, Matt Herrman.
Thank you, Chris.
You are now, Matt the Sherpa Herrman.
Matt the Sherpa.
Thank you, Matt, and have a great day. We'll look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. Absolute pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me on.